This was probably my best performance on Zwift ever.
Welcome everyone, this is stage 2 of Tour de Zwift 2025 and today I decided to race this one. As usual, there is over 1000 people in this ride, and since I've joined late, I immediately needed to put down high power in order to even get to the front group. This is a ride where the new Scotland route got introduced, and in my opinion it is one of the most fun routes that Zwift even has at this point. It's got a perfect balance of difficulty and fun. It's very rolling terrain and there is nothing bland about this route. One lap on this route is 11.4 kilometers and 104 meters of elevation gain. During the stage 2 of Tour de Zwift 2025 we were doing 2 laps on this route. There are basically 3 places on this route where you are in danger of being dropped. 2 of them are short but very steep climbs, and the third is a section of steady climbing that, especially on lap 2, can get very tiring, especially when you are racing with strong group. I raced this one in Monday prime time, which basically guaranteed a very brisk pace at the front. Lately I've been trying a strategy where I basically hammered the climbs very hard and then basically coast on the descents. I found that if I arrive at the top of the hill among the first riders, I can really recover in the descent afterwards. Obviously this is only applicable if there is a descent after the climb. Here we are approaching the first of the 3 spots I mentioned that have the ability to drop you if you are not careful enough, so I really put the pedal down and hope for the best. You can also see that in this race I'm trying a new position on the bike when I'm climbing. Up until this point when I was climbing I basically always stayed on the hoods, and that often resulted in my quads really hurting. However, I found out that if I will climb on the drops, I will be able to utilize the back of my legs way more and the climbing will be more comfortable. Quick descent from the castle, and here we are approaching the breakaway Bray Reverse, which is labeled as KOM on the course map, but it is not very steep, so you really cannot expect anything major to happen in here. I actually felt really good at the first few climbs in this race, and since the terrain is always rolling, I always had the opportunity to recover on the descent after the climb. After you descend the breakaway Bray from the other side, a section of steady climbing starts, and it goes basically until the top of Clyde Kicker in Glasgow. I thought that if I was going to be dropped in this race, it would be probably somewhere in here, maybe on the second part right before entering Glasgow. That section really requires hard and steady effort, but I didn't expect it to happen on the first lap, because up until this point I've been feeling actually pretty well. And that's actually something I am really happy about. In most of my races in the last months I've been feeling pretty bad, and that was basically unavoidable product of my poor training in 4th quarter in 2024. But here I felt I might be getting into another chapter of my racing. My training is going pretty well lately. I've been training a lot, I've been training hard, and the results of that basically have to come, right? And here we are approaching the 3rd spot where you can get dropped. This is the Clyde Kicker in Glasgow. And on this climb you basically need to go all out or almost all out, because there is a descent right after this climb, so if you are not at the top with the group you will get dropped immediately. Be very careful when you are doing this climb. It is very tempting to stop the effort early, but you really want to go hard until the banner itself, and you want to enter it preferably among the first people in the group, as the downhill will really carry all the momentum you've got from the climb. That was successful for me here, and I'm happy to report that I am finishing the first lap of this course in the lead group. Originally that was my primary goal. I didn't know how hard the effort in the front group would be, but at this point I've still felt really good, so I continued with the front to the second lap. And right at the start of the second lap, it got very clear that for some of the riders in the group, the first one was only a warm-up and the pace actually increased really fast. I have to also admit that this race I was pretty lucky with the power-ups. Here I got the featherweight and I was able to use it on the cliffs climb, which is coming very soon, to keep up with the increasing pace of this group. However, at this point still I was feeling pretty well. You can see that my heart rate isn't anything crazy yet. I'm doing about 165 BPM, which for me is nothing significant. That being said, high heart rate usually isn't my biggest problem. Usually my legs start to hurt quite a bit sooner before my heart rate gets high, and that's actionable information for me. It tells me that I really need to focus on my leg strength. I am quite decent aerobically, but my leg strength is lacking lately, so I have actually scheduled some low cadence, high strength intervals for the coming days. We are now at the top of the cliffs and we began our descent towards the castle. I'm trying to recover before the steep section as well as possible because I'm afraid that this might be my breaking point. So I'm basically doing zone 1, zone 2, drafting behind other riders, and here we approach the second climb to the castle and I really push it again, doing almost 7 watts per kilo, and that effort basically ensured that I reached the top among the very first riders. And I need to be honest, at this point I had feeling that I didn't have for a long time on Zwift. I felt strong, I felt powerful, and I felt in control. Once again, quick recovery towards the breakaway Bray reverse. I'm not very afraid of this climb, because like I said previously, it's not very long, it's not very steep, and there isn't a high risk of being dropped, but I didn't want to underestimate it, so I again pushed the pedal down, and that once again allowed me to reach the top among the first in the group. Here it looks like we might have a breakaway attempt. Generally on courses like this, breakaway attempts aren't very easy because the group behind you is going very fast, and in order to succeed you really need to put down high wattage, and that was the case here. The breakaway attempt got caught really quickly, and now we are slowly reaching the part that I'm actually the most afraid of, and that is the roundabout before the Skr Summit climb. We need to descend here a little bit for that, but this roundabout actually starts the section that is steadily uphill, and it basically finishes in Clydekicker in Scotland. And I have to admit that right here I was already pretty tired. My heart rate isn't really reflecting it well, but you can see that the group is increasing the power, starts splitting, and from now on it will be only mind over matter if I will be able to hang on to them. By this point I didn't really believe that, but then again it would be a real pity if I got dropped now after a pretty decent performance in the whole race. So I tried to find my remaining strength, joined the group and started preparing for the spot that will ultimately decide if this race is going to be success or a failure. Clydekicker number 2. I popped my drafting boost, which was pretty good power up for this since I was at the tail of the group, and to really put the power down once again managed to do 8 watts per kilo. Once again an effort this hard very short before the finish hindered my ability to sprint by the end by some margin, but ultimately to win the sprint you need to get there. So by this point the pace was obviously very hard. I tried to hang on to the group. It would be a real shame if I got dropped after all this. I kept repeating myself that it is probably the last 40 seconds of pain, but even then I was sort of afraid that I might get dropped here only a few hundred meters before the finish line, so I used the Zwift play to steer and cut the inside of the corners that managed to get me back into contact with the group. Here were actually some of the riders that were only finishing the first lap. We are now doing the last turn of this race, and despite it is pretty clear I'm not going to podium this, I'm going all out of the saddle in the drops, doing about 8 watts per kilo. My sprint is limited from the effort on Clyde Kicker, but here I am doing almost 10 watts per kilo, overtaking one rider after another, and I actually managed to finish this race in 16th spot out of more than 1000 riders. Here you can see my final stats and the power chart, and I'll see you in the next one.